Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the eDiscovery Channel. This is Tom O'Connor from wonderful downtown New Orleans, Louisiana, where we're finally coming out of the winter time. I'm here, as always, with a good friend, Rocky Messing. Still in Charm City, are you, Rocky? Still in Baltimore?
Still in Baltimore, Maryland.
All right.
Yep.
My one of my other favorite cities in the world. And we're very happy to have with us today Ms. Kenya Dixon, the GC and COO of Empire Technologies Risk Management Group. Did I get that right, Kenya?
You got it right, Tom. Thank
All right,
you.
excellent. And you're based in DC, is that correct?
I am. I am based in DC. I am currently in West Virginia, though.
How's it?
It's spring break, and my daughter and I thought we'd get out of the house, and so we're up in the mountains in West Virginia.
Beautiful country. When I lived in Baltimore, I used to go out there all the time. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Gorgeous country.
Back in the day when I actually got out and did stuff, I used to go whitewater rafting in West Virginia.
Yeah,
awesome.
Beautiful area.
Yeah.
So, Kenya, these conversations we do are really informal, almost like if you were, as I recall, one of the panelists on the University of Florida eDiscovery conference yesterday, right?
Yes, I was. Yeah, I've done that conference for several years now.
Yeah, as was I, and in the normal course of events, we would run into each other at the event and say hi and chat a little bit. And so we're trying to recreate those sorts of conversations for people who aren't at shows or are stuck someplace because of COVID. Although I saw, did I read correctly that they had close to 2,000 attendees at one point at that thing yesterday?
Yeah. I was looking at really popular event, so I was really happy to see that.
Yeah,
Bill
me too.
Did a wonderful job.
Yeah, Bill's done a great job there, and I was glad to see a number that high. That's got to be some sort of a record, and I'm sure he's proud. He should be. He did a great job and great content, great speakers all day long. So you have a really interesting background in that you worked for, as I recall, the FDIC and the FTC at various times, and then in the White House at some point. So you've worked with some high-powered government interests over the years. How did you get into this space? What got you, into not just legal but e-discovery, and what fired your imagination, as the Stones would say?
It seems like my entire career has just been falling backwards into great places. So I can't remember the last time I applied for a job. Like every job that I've had, I've kind of fallen into, one position after another. So I came out of law school in the 90s and I became a litigator. I was a litigator, a big firm litigator for a number of years. And I took some time off to get my daughter's school ready. And so we moved to Florida and got her school ready. And then I went back to my firm. I was at Epstein, Becker & Green, which is a firm that I hold in high esteem. It was a lovely firm to work at. I worked there twice, so I must have liked it. Then went to another.
Is that in DC? Is that in DC? Are you a DC native?
No, I'm not. Actually, I was born and raised in New York City, and I went to Brooklyn High School, so I'm a New Yorker, but I have a New York sensibility. I was never. I always kind of fit better, a little better in the South. My family's from the South.
Okay.
And so I went to school in Virginia. I went to William & Mary for law school. I went to Norfolk State for undergrad. And then I kept switching, kind of majors. I was a political science major. I went to college on an engineering scholarship, but didn't want to do that. Switched majors to journalism and then fell into this economics program. Got a degree in political science and economics. Went to law school at William & Mary. Did the tax program because I was going to be a tax planner and international tax and business planning. I went and studied in the Netherlands. Something David Horgan and I like to joke about all the time is that he went to school in the Netherlands. I went to school in the Netherlands. And then came back and became a member of moot court and fell in love with litigation, fell in love with oral arguments. And so all the tax classes I had, I threw them to the wind and fell headfirst into litigation. And that's what I did for a number of years. And then at some point in time, I got a divorce and I had a small kid. And the litigation is hard to do as a single parent. My daughter needed more attention, and I wasn't coming home. You know, when you're a litigator, you're caught up in what you're doing, and I
Right.
would forget to get out of the office in time to get her, you know, and even if I had, you know, the nanny, you know, I switched from aftercare to a nanny, and that didn't work because the nanny was calling saying, A, you haven't come home, and B, your kid's hysterical. So I had to get out of litigation. I wasn't going to be able to continue to do that, to juggle both. And I started looking for something else to do, and I fell into a position at Lockheed Martin.
Ah,
And they told me it was a 9 to 5 job, which was not true.
Is anything today?
never
Yeah.
is.
It was not a 9 to 5 job, but what it was a transition from pure law to pure technology. And, you know, they say Lockheed Martin is the Harvard of technology. I learned an incredible amount while I was there. I was there for about 3 years. But immediately, you know, the economics and the tax and the law in my brain was saying, they're not doing this properly. There's another way to do this. And so I came out, did some things, and then started a law firm, an e-discovery law firm, because I thought we could do it better.
Wow.
I mean, one crucial mistake. I started the firm with my own money. And so I would say to any entrepreneur, do not start a business with your own cash, because you eat into that cash the first couple of years. You
Yep.
really do before things kick off.
Yep.
And I just started to get regular clients in the door when I got contacted from someone I used to work with at Lockheed Martin who said, look, I'm at the FDIC and they need some help. They've got this end-to-end information governance program, and we're trying to think who could help us with this, and your name kept coming up, and we'd like you to come over here. And I said, I'd love to have the FDIC as a client. And they said, oh, no.
It's not the way it works, right?
I want you to come here and be an employee. And so I had to think about it, right? So I had dumped all this money into the firm. It was just starting to make some money. I was running around, and I was like, this might be a little bit easier. It might be easier on my kid. It might be easier on me. Let me try it.
Right. Yeah.
And I had never thought of the federal government as a place to work before that. I had just never, it never occurred to me. I knew there was a
Really?
federal government.
Being in DC, it had never occurred to you that
Never.
maybe the Fed.
I had one interaction with someone in the federal government. It wasn't a great interaction. I didn't find the person to be sharp or interested, or, you know, like I just didn't feel like it was the kind of environment I wanted. One person, you know, there's
Right.
hundreds, thousands of federal
Oh,
employees. I had one interaction, and I
Going to
said,
school
you
in
know,
Baltimore, I had the same experience. I just, you know, it was kind of like a place where intellectuals went to die.
right.
You know?
So I said, federal government, you know,
Yeah.
but I went,
Yeah.
and FDIC, unbeknownst to me, is like a jewel in the federal government. It is really this amazing place. It's state of the art. It's got some of the best brains in the world are right there. Its mission is fascinating. The people were smart and kind and interesting. And I was like, wow, federal government. Didn't realize it could be,
Yeah.
you know, intellectually stimulating. The people were interesting and smart, and they all had hobbies and other things that they were doing. I mean, it was just really, for me,
There were people.
Real people.
it was really quite, you know, a revelation.
Right.
And so I stayed there for just under 3 years, and then took a position at the Federal Trade Commission,
Right.
which is, it was going through a situation where its e-discovery had completely broken down. Like the Federal Trade Commission is a law firm, basically. It's a federal law firm. It's where the, you know, people have a couple of different missions. One is consumer protection. The other is competition, a lot of antitrust, mergers and acquisitions. And it's very bright people who work really very hard, but the technology was just
Behind
non-existent.
really even non-existent back. So this is like when, around 2012, something like
2015, 2014, 15,
Okay.
yeah.
And
And it
even
was
then
just a mess.
behind. Wow.
It was not, nothing worked. They couldn't get their work done, and they were trying. It's so interesting because the general counsel said a good chunk of my job is just keeping the public from knowing how bad this is. And so
isn't that all our jobs every time is just PR, make everyone, make it look like all things are fine while the ship's sinking and we're, bailing water out the back. So
yeah.
I remember I started work on a Monday, and on Tuesday, I remember asking like one of the project managers that was there, who was in charge of like the application, and I said, so what is I said, well, do we have redundancy in the system? And she said no. Now, my new director didn't know what any of the technical terms were because she had been like a chief of staff and, had done some legal stuff, but really, no understanding of any of the technical stuff. And so the project manager said, there's no redundancy in this system. I said, well, is there a backup plan in case the system goes down? She says, no, there is no backup plan whatsoever. And I said, okay. And on Tuesday, the system went down.
Wow.
Yep.
So I got in the door like I
see, I think it was all your fault, for saying something.
Yeah.
It never went down before.
Yeah.
Oh no, it had been going down quite a bit, and they hadn't told me this in the interviews. It had been going down quite a bit, and so I spent the next 3 years gutting everything and rebuilding it.
Cool.
And so when I left the FTC, they had a brand new state-of-the-art system. I feel free to say we installed Relativity, but we installed some stuff behind the firewall, but I pushed everything into the cloud because they didn't have the ability to manage it on site. They didn't have the space. They didn't have the tech, the ability, the staff, the know-how. They couldn't do it. So we pushed it all into the cloud. And the interesting thing about that was I had to learn cybersecurity to do it, which in the government they refer to as information security, not cybersecurity, but the rest of the people in the world who aren't in information security call it cybersecurity. So I had to learn like what the rules were and how to make sure that the Federal Trade Commission's data was not breached. Because I kept saying, no matter what I do, if they get breached, everyone's going to say, Kenya got the FTC breached. It was her. Like everyone would know it was me. And so that I used to wake up in the middle of the night, like in sweats. But I had to learn it. I had to take classes. I had to read books. I had to download cybersecurity material on Audible.
To educate yourself, that's
yeah,
and nothing like learning while you're on fire. I mean,
right, exactly. I called people in the industry and I said help. I remember calling Mary Mack when the system first went down. I was like, Mary, you're affiliated with this company and I don't know what to do. I need help. And she snapped her fingers, and that company sent all their top executives in to help us. I remember calling chief technology officers and CISOs in private sector corporations that I knew of. I didn't really know them, but I called them and I said, and I used the power of the government to say, I need your help. And people would teach me. I was tutored for 3 years, really, by people in various industries so that I could kind of get a lay of the land of what was needed. And people were kind and gracious, generous with their time and their knowledge. It was a fantasy job come true because I got to do it, almost all of it, from scratch. They gave me the money to do it. And I got to call on like some of the best people in the industry who I'm still very close to, like all of them, because they were just amazing geniuses that walked me through every step. And some of them said, you're going to have to take a class to learn this.
Right. But at least they tell you, like they give you that direction to go in. And do you think that that's something that today, like Tom said, the reason why we started doing these chats is because people aren't meeting in person, aren't having these types of interactions. do you think that that's something that if you were starting again in the industry now, and trying to figure this out, and you knew Mary, you knew some of these people who you could contact, are we losing that that interaction and that relationships by the fact that we're not getting together? The fact that people aren't just going to randomly meet you and say, "Oh, I met Kenya," and maybe you're on a panel, but there's 15 people speaking at a conference who are public, and everyone else who are amazing resources in the industry, people aren't meeting them.
So I think that a testament to your life is that you have to just roll with the punches, and you have to be flexible. This is just life. Pandemics and plagues happen every 100 years. And sometimes you're alive during that 100 years. Like if you live just 80 and you're just like, 10 years after the last one and 10 years before okay, great. But if you live long enough, the majority of us will live through something like this. And so you just got to roll with it. And I can tell you, there are a number of chat groups that I belong to, text groups, that I talk to. I have started doing like coffee with people, virtual coffee, and catching up with people that I haven't spoken to in a long time. Just like, oh my God, I can't believe your kid's in college. Last time I spoke to you, they were 7. Just having conversations with people. And that's really what it's all about, right? Is cluing into people. This machine, is a portal that we wouldn't have had in 1918 and during the last plague, right? So this, to me, I think it's another way of doing what we do.
Yep.
So I have become very close to some people that I wasn't as close to before the pandemic, even though I haven't seen them, and I probably won't see them until we all go to ILTACON in August, because I think that's the first open conference, and I'm going. I'm getting out of the house. I'm going to go.
I'm going. At least know that there's something there.
Yeah, I'm going, and I just feel like you just talk to people. And so I have done these interviews, a ton of them, and gotten to know people. Like, Tom, I see you at every conference, but we never sit down and just shoot
right.
just, it's like, hey, Tom, how are you? How's this? If we're at dinner.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like we just keep moving.
Yep.
Now we're being forced to have these one-on-one conversations. I guess we're not being forced to, but we're choosing to.
Right.
And it's just the next thing. You just roll with it.
Cool.
You made a great point, because we were talking the other day about, we had to cancel Mardi Gras because of COVID. Never mind the fact that it was 25 degrees out and I would have left the house anyways. But, and I thought, that's not really true. In 1879, they canceled Mardi Gras because of a yellow plague pandemic. And then, of course, 1918. I grew up with stories from both of my parents about how devastating the flu was in 19. So you're right. This is a cyclical sort of thing that's just fresh to some of us when I was a kid, it was, growing up in the 50s, it was polio. Polio devastated the population.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew kids who, didn't get the shot in time and were afflicted with polio, were on crutches all their life. And that's pretty much been eradicated in this country. So yeah, you're right. It's life. It's just part of life. But that's the good. Are resilient. People do.
And we've got technology.
So,
when I was a kid, we talked about one day being able to talk to people and see each other. But now we can do it. And so I have some conversations now. It's interesting because the phone is an amazing thing. Kelly Twigger texted in the middle of the night, hey, court case, it's an interesting case. I'm going to send it out to you. And so, I've got all these relationships that I've developed on, and tons of them, like all my girlfriends, we have a book club now. We never did a book club. We never read the same books. We don't even like the same books, but we're forcing ourselves to read through these horrible books and get together and talk about. The books are just the worst.
Remind me.
We're celebrating birthdays,
Remind me that we don't want to join Kenya's book club. Just
yes. Take a note.
So,
Note
Like
to self.
1 out of every 5 books is a book worth reading.
something that you need to. So, getting back to your career, how did you end up, like, how did the White House opportunity come up? Because, you know, that records information governance there, that's not a easy task that a lot of people would want to even take on. So how'd that come about?
The same way everything happens. So I was just wrapping up everything at the FTC, and it's funny because I always tell people when I'm done here, you know, especially like if I'm fixing something, installing something new, and it's all working and everything's, you know, I've done everything, got the people right, the technology right, you know, we got the budgets in place, we got training for everybody, and everything's working. Then I'm like, no crisis, I could go on to the next thing.
Yep.
And so I remember somebody saying, why don't you just stay here and enjoy what you've done? And I was like, well, that would be kind of boring.
How fun is that? Right.
Yeah. So something tragic happened. A person that I had become very close to at the FTC tragically died, and I was feeling really very sad. And they sent an investigator out, and I was talking to the investigator, and I was on my way home, and I got a text message from a friend of mine who worked in the White House who said, look, we lost our information governance director. He left, and we don't know what to do. We just have so many issues here. And do you think you would be interested in coming over here for detail? And I said, yes. Like, I didn't even hesitate. I was
Right.
like,
How do you say no to that? Right.
I will come right now.
Right.
I remember my daughter saying to me, but couldn't you go for Obama instead of going? And I was like, no,
Yeah.
Obama didn't ask me. Obama didn't need me. This is where I'm needed.
Right.
I'm going to go do
this is a true challenge. So
Yeah.
right. And so it's interesting because the way that things were organized at the White House is that there is an Office of Administration Council.
Wait a minute. They were organized at the White House?
Well, there was an organization
there was
already
a structure.
placed.
And I mean that generically, like any White House.
Right.
Organized?
It's collapsing in on itself.
Yeah.
And the White House is not designed. It's not a litigating entity, right? It's not a bunch of lawyers that are litigating. It's policy. You know, it really is a policy-making place, and then there's some technology, and you try to do the things that you do. The biggest component that was most impressive to me was the cybersecurity piece. And lo and behold, the Director of Information Governance at that time sat under the CISO, the White House CISO, and under the OA Council. So it's a political appointee. The CISO is not a political appointee, or it wasn't at that time. Things change a lot. But the CISO was a brilliant, brilliant person, Joseph Schatz, who was called in from the Senate. He was the Senate CISO after the Russian attack in 2014. And he had kept everything safe, and he needed someone to take over the information governance piece, which included e-discovery, presidential records, federal records, information assurance, and some other pieces. And so I said, sure. I went over as a detailee, and a month in, he was like, you're staying permanently. And I was like, okay, I was going to go back to the FTC. He's like, no, you're gonna stay here.
Yeah.
So at the end of 6 months,
you're in, right?
right, they made me a permanent employee there, and I stayed there. And I spent the majority of my time preparing for subpoenas, because we knew that the House was going to turn over. You know, the first election was going to happen. The House was going to turn over, going to become Democratic, and they were going to get hundreds of subpoenas. And they had no infrastructure for that. And, you know, lit holes have to go in place. And this is not what they do. The Department of Justice usually handles anything that comes along for the White House, the 1 or 2 things that come up. And now you've got an onslaught of hundreds of subpoenas and FOIA requests from journalists and litigators and public interest groups, civil rights groups. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff happening, and you need not only lit holes, you need preservation. And there really was nothing in place to manage all of this. And so I went to work. And we rebuilt all of the forensic technology, put some other things in place, ordered all new software, we did all the contracts, got some new staff in place. I just rehaul the whole thing over, but never got around to the e-discovery piece. Because, you can only handle, multiple lines of business, so many at a time. And it was exciting and it was challenging, and I really liked the people. And there, in the White House, as in other federal agencies, you have political appointees, but you have the majority of the people are civilians, who work for the Republic. And so I got to know a lot of those people, and got to know a lot of political appointees. I got to know a lot of people, very interesting people. It was one of the most interesting things, but the pace is exhausting.
Yeah,
it's just an exhausting pace.
Yeah.
So if you want to fix things, the White House is a place to go. But you run very fast, but you accomplish very little. Yeah. So it's like running through cement. It's.
Yep. Right.
But are you able to look back at this point and really see, okay, I was able to take it from, maybe only point A to like A minor, but you're able to recognize the accomplishments that you had in those few years.
I think some of the policy was to handle what they had to handle to keep from going to jail, but not to grow anything. So everything that had to be handled that I could handle, if you're going to preserve, to collect, to get ready, get infrastructure in place for a transition potentially, all the stuff that you have to do legally, I was able to do. All the stuff that would have made it better was put on hold. And so once you realize that you're not going to be allowed to improve things or make things better, then what are you doing, right? So I stayed for a little over a year, and then I went to my next challenge, which interestingly enough, and I don't talk about it a lot, I was asked to put some infrastructure in place for the Trump campaign. So I worked in compliance to do some of their information governance. And so I did, and that's a real interesting story. We'll say for another day. But I was on my way here. And so that was supposed to be like a pit stop. Like for 90 days, I would go and make sure the information governance was kind of in place because the campaign wasn't that big. And so I couldn't imagine it taking more than 90 days to make sure that they manage some, Federal Election Commission, regulations, get that stuff in place. But I ended up doing that work for much longer. While also trying to make the transition over to this company, just trying to get here. And then finally got here, and I'm really happy with, what we're doing here.
Cool. Great. Tell us, we're getting close to the end, but tell us a little bit about what are you working on right now?
Yeah, what are you doing now?
So Empire Technologies Risk Management Group is a holding company that is designed with a cybersecurity or an information security focus. The idea is that everything that we supply, whether it's services or technology to the legal sector, that it is wrapped in this information security, this cybersecurity protection, because the biggest failure of information security in this country is law firms. Law firm to law firm data, law firm to vendor data, law firm to government data, vendor to law firm data. It is being exploited. The security protocols are not in place. The law firms are not doing a great job at auditing or understanding the security environment of their vendors. And so we've seen vendors, major vendors, just have huge breaches. And so American data is really being stolen through the legal process. And so my goal is to do two things, two really big things. One is to provide to the legal sector on the private side this understanding of how e-discovery and information security are combined, and how you can have at a reasonable cost point everything you need to be secure while still having your legal workflow.
Yep.
And on the government side, offering the government everything that I wanted that I could never buy in one, from one vendor. So in the government, you're constantly trying to find what you need, and the process to purchase, the acquisition process is so long and it's so cumbersome that, it slows everything down. I'm trying to provide an easier route to getting information governance, the e-discovery piece in particular, to the federal government. And so those are my two big goals. There is another big chunk of the company that does other stuff, because we've been acquiring companies during this the COVID crisis, and so I'm just trying to get out there and just talk to people. So that's what we're doing.
Excellent.
Awesome. So Tom, why don't you take us out?
So our last question for everybody is always, if you could spend a day with somebody from our profession. And it doesn't have to be somebody who's alive. It could be someone who's left us. And it doesn't have to be a work task. If you could spend a day with somebody who you never really got to know at a resort in West Virginia, just relaxing, who would that be? Who would you like to spend a day with?
I recently just talked to some friends of mine in our industry, David Horrigan and Kelly Twigger, and said, guys, let's do something together. Let's go to New York and go to Kelly Twigger's Brothers Restaurant together.
Yes.
So I think right away in the near future, I'd like to hook up with, David Horrigan, maybe Ryan O'Leary and Kelly Twigger, and go to eat at one of Kelly Twigger's Brothers Restaurants. I think he's got a couple in New York.
You could have like the e-discovery version of the Algonquin Club, right? The old writers club from New York. Yeah, that would be great.
Go fly fishing. Right. I'd like to go fly fishing.
Really? You like to fly fish?
I don't know. I've never done it, but I believe I should do every great thing I should try. So. Yeah.
Well, you're in the right neck of the woods for good fly fishing right now in West Virginia. There's some awesome fly fishing out there.
A little cold here for fly fishing.
Well, it's not the season.
It's a little chilly up here right now.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, that's all right. I grew up in Vermont, so that's like balmy weather now. Get the sweater out, So, well, great, Kenya. We really appreciate not just your taking time with us, but taking the time out of special time with your daughter. I know, as a father myself, I know how special that is, and to be able to get out and spend some time. We really appreciate your taking the time to do that.
And
look forward to.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys.
Hopefully, if you don't get to New York with Horrigan and Twigger, we'll hit a steakhouse in Vegas at ILTACON, because that's starting to shape up as maybe a place that knock on wood, and things continue to improve the way they are. I noticed that.
Vaccinated.
We're 42 days short of President Biden's first 100 days, and he hit his 100 million vaccinations today.
Yeah.
And it seems like they've opened them up. My daughter, who's 20, got her notification that she can go get vaccinated. So we'll all be vaccinated by the time ILTACON rolls around. And so
that's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping. Forward. So I'm making, I wouldn't say they're plans yet, but in the back of my mind, that's been circled on the calendar as maybe the next place I'll get to see people live and in person. So hope to see you there. And that would be a great idea. A live chat. We could even set it up and film it and have a live roundtable with a whole bunch of people. That would be awesome. That would be awesome.
I'm there. I'm there.
All right. Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks so much.
It's going to be great.
Rocky, as always, thanks to you. And we'll look to see everybody else next time in the eDiscovery channel. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.